you doing?
Hey, brother. So I'm better now. It's always good to sit down with you.
It's always good to see you and talk to you as well. I mean, what is going on with this movie, American Skin? It is like the the film that could. I mean, everyone's
Mm.
talking about it. It's making all sorts of money. It's buzz is it's attracting award season buzz. I mean, tell me, where did you get the idea to make it?
Well, interestingly enough, it came from a personal experience. I got custody of my 13-year-old nephew in 2013. His father was in prison, and my sister needed help. She asked me, he's growing to that age where I need some support. And so I traveled back to Virginia and sat down with him, and I asked him, if he'd want to come and live with me in California. And I told him it would be a big change, but I told him that, he'd have a lot more opportunities with me. And so he said goodbye to his mother for that period of time and came and lived with me. And it's interesting because immediately I felt relief that he was going to have a great opportunity to have the things in life that he wanted. He'd have an equal opportunity to have a great education. My wife, we all welcomed him in. And less than a year later, August 2014, I'm sitting on my couch and I'm looking at Michael Brown, face down, bloating in the sun, having been murdered. And my nephew turns to me, sitting next to me, and said, Uncle Nate, what do I do if I get pulled over on my bike riding to school? So here I am thinking that I brought him into a better situation. In some ways I had, but he was no more safe than when he was in Virginia. And now riding his bike through a different kind of neighborhood, going to a school with people that also didn't look like him. And I felt kind of embarrassed that I didn't have an answer. I'm the guy that tries to make all these films that have us think about social justice in a certain way. And here I am with this young man who is now my son that is no more safer than when I got him. And I don't have an answer outside of call me. Well, don't call me. Don't grab your phone. Slow the bike down very slowly. Put your feet down slowly. Look over to the officer. Make sure he can see your face so he can see your humanity. Put your eyes up. Move very slowly. And whatever he tells you to do, you do. And just make it home to me safely. And he's looking at me traumatized. And it made me very emotional that I was traumatizing him to protect him and keep him safe. And that kind of was the impetus for it, the need to tell the story. The fact that we have to traumatize our children as they walk outside to keep them safe from the people we pay to be on the street. And then, of course, Sidney Lumet is one of my heroes, a filmmaker. And so over the years, as I wrote this thing that started out as a poem and then got bigger and then started to become a script, I felt the great device would be the 12 Angry Men model. What happens when you lock these people in a room? They can't leave, and they have to have this conversation that people talk about having, but don't really have.
Well, you certainly executed the idea well. And unfortunately, the topic of the film is a subject that Black Americans know well. And because of the recent circumstances around Breonna Taylor and all of the deaths that took place last year. Yeah, George Floyd, of course, and Ahmaud Arbery, and I mean just the endless list. It's one that has become that other communities are also being made aware of, and these social justice issues revolving around damage being done to Black bodies is something that is very much in vogue at the moment. Your film, though, takes a different approach than how we've seen these situations play out. And I think that's probably that plot device is what's making it, so popular. It's really awakening people to, what people eventually do when they're being challenged and put upon. I mean, but did you have any kind of concerns with the approach that your character takes in handling the situation?
Even when in writing it, I thought about it, and I said, how can I tell this story in a way that grips people, that doesn't end in a way, or the process isn't implemented in a way where people feel like, as you said, I've seen this before. I know how this ends. I don't want to be triggered, so I'm going to turn this off. And so I very explicitly I chose images that were incendiary, specifically the machine gun in the precinct. Not because I'm advocating for violence, but because I'm trying to speak to the desperation of a people that are not being heard, they're not being respected, and they're not getting justice. At some point, we have to ask ourselves, are we moving forward or are we moving backward? Are we just becoming desensitized to the fact and handing this legacy off to our children? Or are we willing to have a harder conversation that may come at us being shaken into the space, which is the devices I've used? And I think people do want to see change, but I don't know if people know where to start. So for me, it was introducing them to an age-old device of change, and that is conversation. How do we get the people to talk about how they feel, about the things that they are taught, about any type of response that comes in the situations that lead to these murders? So I went about the task of interviewing countless, dozens of police officers. Some I knew, some were friends of people I knew, and some I'd never met with before. And some of those conversations were heated, and some of them were scary. But I felt if I could get all of these conversations into one script or into one dialogue, then it would be worth the tools I use to get us there.
Violence is in this country is as common as apple pie, as recently witnessed with the attempted insurrection on Capitol Hill. And I mean, your character returns violence with the threat of violence, of true violence. I mean, is this really who we are as a society? Is violence something that we just need to embrace? Maybe that's the only way. That when I first watched the film, I applauded it, because it's like, well, maybe that's the answer. The only way that people are going to respect these lives is if they understand that what the consequences potentially could be for their actions. And
that's
given the recent attack, and
go ahead.
Yeah, and given the recent activities in Washington, I'm just wondering, maybe violence is I don't know, maybe it's the way. Maybe it's something that we shouldn't, in a polite society, you're supposed to tuck that away and hide it. But apparently, I don't know, I'm getting other vibes from some of the things that I'm seeing around me.
Right. Well, I'm a big believer in the idea that subjugation leads to revolution. It just does. You subjugated people long enough, you will see violence. We've seen it throughout the history of this country. This country was founded on revolution, a revolutionary war that came from a people being subjugated and then deciding enough was enough, and you will stop subjugating us or else. That's who we are. That was our beginning. And I think that when we consider films like this or moments in time like this, I don't know if we should look at it from the standpoint of, should we be violent or should we not be violent? I think the first question we should ask ourselves, and you asked it, is this who we are? And if this is indeed who we are, then what are we willing to do to change that? But we can't change a narrative we're not willing to acknowledge. And I think that is where the gap is. When we have people saying, oh, Black Lives Matter is a hate group, they're missing it. There's a gap. There's an understanding gap. There's a social gap. There's a privilege gap. That if we don't plug that hole, then we will see more violence. In January 6th was indicative of something. I think it's different, because when you see people, protesting in the street desperately, and they're asking only for lives to be spared, I don't think it's the same as people attempting a coup in a country where the only thing they're fighting for is the value of their skin. So I think that we just need to be honest about where we are. It seems as though we've gotten to a place where we treat society and politics like the Super Bowl. Are you a Cowboys fan or are you a Steelers fan? And if you like the Steelers, I hate you. If you like the Cowboys, it's like, wait a minute, what are we talking about? I mean, we've screened this film for the Center for Policing Equity. We've shown it to police officers. We've shown it to the victims of families. And conversations that come out of this, all positive, all perspective, all people engaging. What we're seeing is an acknowledgement of the problem. Because if we don't face it and confront it, what we just saw last summer is only the tip of the iceberg. My fear is that the wrong young woman or young man will be killed by the police. And I say wrong, I mean their parents will be willing to go this far and further. So as it stands, it's a cautionary tale. That's what art is supposed to do. My hero, Nina Simone, says the artist's job is to reflect the times. And reflecting the times, we have to ask ourselves, are we willing to be honest about those times? If we are, then changing the narrative is not as hard as you think. It just takes the effort of everyone to say we will confront this honestly and we'll take the steps towards shifting the narrative to a place that creates a healthier environment for all of us.
I mean, the film, has been met with a very tremendous response from the industry, starting, at the Venice Film Festival. And, obviously it's, you're on course to be nominated, during this award season. Does that surprise you?
This is what I'll say. I am desperate for people to see the film. I know what this film does to minds and hearts because I've seen it. We showed the film in Venice Film Festival. These are people it was subtitles. These people didn't speak English. And we had near 11-minute standing ovation. We took it to Deauville in France. Similar situation, very long. The people wouldn't leave. I think that we were all connected in those moments in oppression and in desperation to change. I think there are people that want to change that don't know how. I think there are people that want to join the conversation that don't want to say the wrong thing and don't know how to approach it. So I think the more people that see the film can join in the conversation that is spilled from the young people that were making the film into the streets. And I think that more people that see it, I honest to God, like awards, I'm not really concerned with the awards. I'm really thinking about the possibility that somewhere in the legacy of this film, a cop can take a beat and a life is not taken because of a conversation he had. Like, for example, one of the cops I interviewed reached out to me yesterday and said, I have to be honest, I haven't watched the film yet. Like, what are you waiting for? He was like, I'm just afraid. And I'm like, afraid of what? Afraid that you won't like it? He was like, no, I'm afraid that I'll see it and it'll make me want to change something that I don't believe is possible to change. I think it will mess me up and affect me in being able to do my job. He was really struggling with this. And as we talked more, he said, my best friend is a nurse practitioner. And we've had back and forth. We're close friends. We had back and forth about Black Lives Matter and all these things. And we've argued and had to agree to disagree. And he said, but this film and this moment makes me feel like if what I'm hearing is right, I might feel different coming out of it. And so I challenged him. I said, okay, this is what I want you to do. Don't watch the film alone because I don't want you to feel a certain way and talk yourself out of it. I said, call your friend that's the nurse practitioner and watch it with him. He said, I'm doing it right now. And they're watching it this weekend on Friday. He invited him over, a brother, black man, white cop. They're going to watch this film. And I only can imagine what's going to come out of it. But that is what this is about. You know what I mean? I feel like I shot it to feel and look like a documentary because I want it to have the impact of a documentary.
Well, take us back. Take us to the set. What were those? Because the film, so many areas of the movie is filled with so much tension. I mean, what was it like during the shoot?
It was very difficult. I mean, there were times where we had to stop filming and just start talking. And we have footage of that. There were times where someone in the jury would just break down, or one of the extras would just start crying and we just say, hey, let's take a break. And we'd start talking and having people like, Theo Rossi and Omari Hardwick. These are people that do social justice work every day. So we spoke, and it became like a healing conversation for everyone that was involved. And it's a rare opportunity on a film set, especially when you don't have enough time to be able to stop and have conversations that can inspire healing. You know, and the weird thing is that you learn things about people that you're spending all this time with that you didn't know. You know, it's like one of the guys that played, one of the people with me, that works at a youth home, and he talked about how on the way to set he'd been pulled over, and he's huge, 6'5", 320 pounds, and how he had to, while engaging with the movie, had to live a part of the movie in his real life. And hearing everyone, it was just really, it was a magical experience. And and a lot of the young men you saw in the orange jumpsuits were actual formers that I hired out of ARC, which is Scott Budnick's company. So when I told Scott the movie I was making, and I said, if I want this to be hyper authentic, then I'd rather use returning citizens, people that if they were sitting on that jury, whatever they would want to say instinctively, I'd want that to be said. So I went and talked to them. I said, look, if you've never had an opportunity to speak to a correctional officer or a police officer, because being someone that's a former felon, you have no rights. They snatch you out and they slam you under the curb. I said, now is the moment. When the young Latin brother, Felix, was talking to Theo's character, Felix was just in prison, just got out, so he was able to bring an energy that was new and raw. But I think all of those things created this environment of absolute, authentic experience.
Because he looked like it, like he had just stepped out of someone's jail.
Yeah.
I mean, how long was the shoot?
You really want to know?
Yeah.
We shot that movie in 2 weeks, 14-day schedule.
And you shot it for less than $1 million.
Yes, we did. We shot for less than $1 million. When I decided to make this film, I was determined. I said, there's nothing that's going to stop this movie from being made, because I truly, I needed my nephew to see it, but I truly believed in the power of it. So everyone showed up for nothing, you got to think, we had big stars in this film, and everyone showed up and took scale. Amari, Milana, Shane Paul McGee, Sierra Capri, Vanessa Bell Calloway, Annalyn McCord. Like, these are people that have done big movies. And they read the script, and I sat them down. I said, what I'm trying to do is bigger than movies. Join me, please. And they showed up. And for less than $1 million, we were able to figure this movie out on a 14-day schedule, and still have time left over to have healing moments and therapy sessions where we all cried, Now,
when it came time to shop it, to find the distributor, what was that like?
It's actually really, I'm glad you asked that question, because there was interest, but there was also this feeling, we shot this pre-George Floyd. So I shot this film in first quarter of 2019. So George Floyd hadn't happened. So there was this feeling around the movie, this question of, is this really authentic? You know what I mean? It's like, it has these cops, and the cops are, and the cops are just, and then they kill the kid. Like, it was this, found myself validating the experience of this protagonist. And it was interesting to me, because so many of the people that make decisions around these type of things have never really experienced what we experience on a day-to-day basis. I'm not exaggerating when I say you and I, Gil, when we walk out of our house, it is a dice roll every single day. And it wasn't until George Floyd happened that the phone started ringing off the hook. It was like, so the movie about the police brutality thing, and of course, and to be fair, within those organizations, there were people that cared. Yes, people cared, but it just felt like it wasn't top of mind until it was top of mind. And I think that's the danger of the pendulum swing of what is topical, what is hot, is that sometimes we miss out on moments that could really help us heal because we're thinking about profit margins. You know what I mean? And so thank goodness some of the people we're talking to, we ended up, with Vertical, and it's been no one, they're over the moon with the success. It's from a financial standpoint, it's been remarkably successful. But yeah, it wasn't until George Floyd happened that we were able to secure distribution. And even then, the first question people would ask would be, wow, so how did you do this so fast, so quickly after George Floyd? How were you able to put this together after George Floyd? I'm like, well, our George Floyd is every day. It's topical now and it's timely now, but if you're a Black man or a Black woman in America, that it was timely 10 years ago. And if we're not careful, it'll be timely 50 years from now.
So I think, Nate, the stars were perfectly aligned for this film to come out during right in the middle of the COVID pandemic, because people are at home. And so therefore, it's been able to find a very robust audience, already having grossed, over 5 times what you originally invested in it. So, talk about that. Talk about how people are engaging with it, that COVID has become has offered a blessing instead of a curse.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. When you talk about the fact that George Floyd happened, and it happened at a time where people's eyes were glued, to the screen, and that mattered. Like I said, I was receiving phone calls in ways that I never would from people that never would otherwise be engaged. So going into this moment of making this film, specifically when we knew we were going to put out the trailer, we knew that the trailer was incendiary and that would get people's attention when it comes to approaching this thing differently. Not the whole just holding hands, but, oh no, you took my son, there will be real consequences. We have an or else that is put into play. So the COVID of the situation, not to in any way minimize the devastation that the COVID has caused, but from the sheer standpoint of people being at home and being in front of their devices and being open to word of mouth, it inspired the type of word of mouth that we never could have planned for. And as you said, we're 5 times, we're over 5 million. We made the film for under 1 million. So people are watching, and not only they're watching, they're sharing. We've seen Diddy post right when Diddy came out of the theater. Tears in his eyes, he went straight to Instagram. We've been blessed to have, LeBron James sent a tweet out, wow, must see this film. I don't know if everyone's out and about that happens. I don't know if that happens if everyone's out and about, but I will say this, the fact that everyone is at home and was at home, it was a powder keg, and it was an explosion in the way that people are talking about this film all over. Cross political lines, cross color lines. And I, for one, desperately am hoping that more people that don't look like me see it, because we know what our voice sounds like, but it's oftentimes drowned out by other things that are happening in society. And this is a moment where we were able to capture our voices in a bubble, and it is reverberating, and people are hearing it. They're seeing this film and they're having conversations that they've never had.
And why is it important that white people, let's just call it what it is, because this is a story that is often told, that's well known in our community. But why is it important that white people see this film?
Well, because I think that we have to be honest about the fact that, this country is built on privilege and power. And there are 2 things that in this country, people that look like me traditionally have not had. We every once in a while, if an athlete's fast enough, catches really well and throws the ball, whatever, if an artist sings really well, or filmmaker makes a film that it's hard to really compete with privilege and power when you are a people that is a part of an oppressed and marginalized group. We see that with women's groups. We see that with the LGBTQ community. It's very hard to compete. So as a Black person that deals with this stigma and this trauma every day, and know people that deal with it every single day, we recognize that the people that have the power to have the type of shift that can happen quickly in this are connected to white people. Whether it be political, whether it be social, whether it be the media, whatever it is. When, you know, we saw it with George Floyd, the sheer number of people in the street that didn't look like us. You know, like I said, the conversations I was having showed that there is a benefit of having more people outraged that actually have the power and privilege to confront it in a way that is way more impactful, quicker, more quickly than some of the you know, historical context and record we've had as a group. Do I believe that we can make, you know, have the change we want to see as a people? You know, we have Black Lives Matter, we have Color of Change, we have your organization, we have organizations doing the work. But if we are serious about shifting the narrative, it has to be an all hands on deck approach. And we're seeing different organizations stand in the gap and hold themselves accountable. But we have to push that envelope. If we really are serious about seeing a shift in the narrative around Black bodies being decimated in the streets.
You know, sadly, the issues that are depicted in this film aren't just American, but there are circumstances that exist in the UK and also in France and other areas of the world. What has the international response been like to the film?
It's funny because it hasn't opened in other countries yet, but some people in other countries have found ways to see it. You know, when we talk about people being subjugated, you don't need to go much further. If you're leaving our country, South America, you go to Brazil. You want to talk about people that are being marginalized, the Afro-Brazilians. You know, I'm having conversations over social media. Some of them have seen the film and they are, when I say ready, they are inspired in ways where they're already making films and making projects as a result that we've talked about. When you talk about the UK, we don't really, you know, because we also don't control mainstream media, it's also hard for us to get, you know, the desperation in our voices to the masses outside of a film. So the fact that it's resonating with, you know, my UK brothers and sisters is a very real thing. In Africa, you know, the diaspora is very, you know, obviously very big, but we're getting people who are calling from Africa that are like, this film is important. How can we contribute? You know, we're looking to get distribution on the continent, you know, as we speak. In the Caribbean, where the response has been unlike anything I ever could imagine, and it hasn't even opened in these countries yet. This is when it talks about the fact that when you are born brown on this planet, you are being born into a system that will seek to destroy you more than it does lift you up. A film like this and so many other films are important as we consider their messages and add them to the lexicon of our freedom.
Right. No, we could certainly go on and on and on talking about this subject. I really want, if we could just have one more question, you guys.
Right.
How much of this, because you know, they had this was very much in the news over the summer in Nigeria, and obviously in that country it was Black on Black. So I'm wondering how much of this is just about power. I mean, the police have power. And, you know, so where does that play into it? That people who have power want to subjugate people who they feel are beneath them. I mean, certainly race has a lot to do with it, or the way it's manufactured here.
Well, it's we can't dissect power dynamics without looking at the roots of those problems, right? When we can't talk about Black on Black crime in Africa without talking about colonizers and how many people have gone into these countries and made these countries poor and desperately dependent upon them, incited and perpetuated civil war so they can snatch and grab resources. You know, so I think that, yes, power is super important, but I think systems are what we need to think about. One of the things in this film that I don't want people to miss is when the police officer's talking about what he's being trained to do, we have to ask ourselves, well, who's doing the training? We're talking about a system of policing that perpetuates violence against Black skin, not just the one-off cop. If the police department creates the widget that is the police officer, then taking one of the widgets out of the equation only makes room for the next widget to come in and do the exact same job the other widget did. So what we have to do is change the infrastructure around how that widget is made and programmed. You know, so yes, it's power. And I think at the root of 99% of it is race. That said, I think that there are systems that need to be changed. We're seeing it happen right now in Hollywood, where the agendas around representation are being forced to change. It's not, well, we might put, it's no. Inclusion, diversity is not only important, but we will force the hand of this system to change itself. And I think the same thing has to be done from a standpoint of policing. If we're serious, I keep saying that. If we're not serious, then the pendulum will swing from here to here, and it'll be a different thing next year, and then we'll swing right back, and there'll be a body bleeding or bloating in the street, and then we'll care again, then it'll swing again. When you ask another reason why, ask why white people need to see it, well, if I have to have a conversation with my 13-year-old son at the time about how society may put him in a situation where it could take his life for no reason, white people need to be sitting and having conversations with their children. The same conversation about how people that don't look like them will be subject to that same type of treatment, and how they're privileged to not be in that situation, because maybe that child will want to join the fight too. Again, all hands on deck. Anyone that's down for freedom and for healing and for preservation of life, I think we all just have to jump in. And again, I don't have all the answers. I'm nobody's hero, and this is nobody's answer to savior to all. This is just a movie that adds to the conversation. There are people doing the real work every single day. This is just a fraction of a voice that I'm tossing into the pot that hopefully helps take us all closer to where we want to go.
What are the top 3 takeaways that you want people to have? How do you want the response, people to rally around and respond to this project ultimately?
Well, I think the one takeaway, however you feel, and I try to design film so they put lead in your feet so you can't get up too quickly. You got to sit in it for a while. But the one thing is a question. It's, if not us, then who? And if not now, then when? Because we can't keep passing the buck to the next generation and having blood in the streets of children until it solves itself. It just doesn't work that way. I will also say the takeaway is to recognize the only way forward toward healing is through honest confrontation with what is our now. It's undeniable that this is our now. When you hear people say, this isn't us, that's not true. It is us. It's been us in this country, because we have been tortured, and we've been menaced, and we've been intimidated, and we've been killed all the way back to the plantation, all the way back to the trip where we were brought here as refugees, as chattel. You know what I mean? So I think that there's something to be recognized in that. And also, I think the last takeaway, which is for me, maybe the most, I don't want to say important, but the most timely. And that is, anything you want to see changed in society, you have to not look at it as charity, like giving away turkeys on Thanksgiving, or contributing to some GoFundMe. It has to be in the very fabric of who you are as a human being. So many people called me during George Floyd, devastated, crying on the phone. What do I do? And many of those same people have kind of lost their flame now that it's not at the forefront of who we are. Real change doesn't come from emotional pendulum swings. It comes from setting your feet and recognizing that this is a forever thing. If you're tired of seeing Black people being killed by police officers, then get involved politically, get involved socially, get involved in your everyday groups, and try to take on the responsibility of not only changing your heart and mind, because that's not enough, but changing the hearts and minds of the people that you're around every day.
Well, brother, you've certainly succeeded in delivering that message. So, Nate, I want to thank you for your time, and certainly, wish you the best with this project and everything else you have coming in the future.
Thank you so much, brother. I appreciate you. I appreciate your time. Thank you for doing this.
Always.